She was just a simple woman, forced to play the violin as a joke. But when her bow touched the strings, she silenced the crowd and changed her life forever. Alina was a quiet woman who lived in a small town where everyone seemed to know everyone, but no one really knew her. She didn't talk much and never tried to be part of the crowd. Most people passed by her like she was invisible. She wasn't rich, not even close. Her clothes were old, simple, and sometimes torn at the edges. She tied her hair back every morning, carried a cloth bag with weak handles, and walked to the market to buy only what she needed, never more. Some of the market sellers liked her, because she always smiled softly and said thank you, even if she bought just a single apple or some bread. But others made fun of her behind her back. They called her names like Ragwoman or Ghost Lady. Nobody knew anything about her past, and they didn't care to ask. To them, she was just another poor woman living in a rented room, cleaning people's houses and doing laundry to survive. But what the town didn't know was that Alina had a story, one that started far away from this quiet village. In her younger days, she had lived in a big city. She wasn't always poor, and she wasn't always alone. She had once been someone people applauded, someone who performed on stage with a violin in her hands. She had studied at a famous music school where talented people came from all over the country. Her fingers danced on the strings like they were telling stories. People would close their eyes when she played and forget the world around them. Her talent wasn't just skill. It came from her heart. She had worked hard, practiced for hours every day, and never complained. Her dream was to play in an orchestra and travel the world. For a little while, she was on that path. She even fell in love with a kind man named Tomas, who also loved music. They got married and had a baby boy named Luca. Life was good. It felt like a dream, but dreams can break. When Luca was 7 years old, there was an accident, a car crash. It happened in the blink of an eye. One moment, they were driving to visit Elena's parents. The next moment, the car was spinning. She remembered screaming. She remembered the silence afterward. And she remembered the cold, hard truth that her son didn't survive. That pain, there are no words to describe it. After that, nothing was. The same Tomas couldn't handle the grief. He stopped talking, stopped eating, and eventually he left. He didn't leave with anger. He left with sadness that was too heavy. Alina was left alone in the house they once filled with laughter. The violin in the corner began to gather dust. She tried to play once after the funeral, but her hands shook. Her tears fell on the strings, and the music turned into cries. She couldn't bear it. She packed her things, left the city, and found this small town far away from everything and everyone. She didn't want to be recognized. She didn't want to be asked questions. She just wanted to disappear quietly. So she started over with nothing. She rented a small room with a leaking roof, took whatever work she could find, cleaning, ironing, taking care of old people, and tried not to think about music, but music is like a shadow. You can't run from it if it's inside you. Sometimes. When the town was asleep and the streets were silent, she would take out her old violin. It was still with her, hidden in a box under her bed, wrapped in a soft cloth. She hadn't told anyone about it. She hadn't even looked at it for years. But on some nights, when the sadness was too loud in her heart, she would open that box, sit near the window, and play. The notes were quiet, almost whispers. She didn't want anyone to hear it. Wasn't a performance. It was a conversation with her memories. The sound was soft, slow, and full of emotion. It was the kind of music that made you feel everything at once: loss, hope, pain, beauty. Her neighbors sometimes heard it and wondered who played such haunting music so late at night. But they never guessed it was the same woman they saw carrying groceries during the day. After all, why would a poor cleaning lady be able to play the violin like that? Alina never talked about her past. She kept her eyes low when people asked questions. If someone said, "You look familiar," she would smile politely and walk away. She didn't want to go back to that part of her life, not because she hated it, but because it reminded her of everything she had lost. She lived like this for years, quiet, alone, unnoticed. Every morning she followed the same routine: wake up before sunrise, make tea, take her cleaning bag, and walk to her job. Some days, she worked in the houses of rich families, She would polish their expensive floors and dust their grand pianos. One day, a little girl in one of those houses saw her looking at the piano for too long and asked, "Do you play?" Alina just shook her head and smiled. She didn't lie, but she didn't answer either. Life moved slowly in the town. People aged, children grew, but Alina remained the same calm and invisible. The violin stayed under her bed, waiting for nights when her heart needed to speak. Then, where Alina usually came to buy some vegetables and eggs, a group of young people were filming something. They had cameras and microphones and were talking loudly. One of them was a girl named Marcella. She was well known in town because of her videos on social media. She loved making funny clips, especially the kind that made fun of people. She thought it was entertaining to trick someone or laugh at someone's mistake. Marcella noticed Alina. She whispered something to her friend and pointed. Then she walked up to Alina with a big fake smile. "Hi, we're doing a town talent show next weekend. We heard you might know how to play the violin. You should join." Alina looked surprised. "Me? Yes, you. Come on. It'll be fun," Marcella said, while her friend secretly recorded the conversation on her phone. People around them started laughing. Someone muttered, "This'll be a disaster." Alina looked around. The faces weren't friendly. They expected her to say no, but something inside her shifted. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was pain. Oh, maybe she was just tired of hiding. She nodded. "Okay, I'll come." Marcella's eyes widened. She hadn't expected that answer. She quickly turned away and whispered to her friend, "This is going to be hilarious. We'll go viral for sure." They had no idea what was coming. That night, Alina sat on her bed, holding the violin in her lap. She stared at it for a long time. Her fingers ran over the wood, feeling every scratch, every curve. The smell of old rosin filled the air. She took a deep breath and played just one note. The sound filled the room. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and she knew it was time, not to prove herself to anyone, but to remember who she really was. The simple woman who walked with her head down in the market had once been Alina, the violinist, and she still was. She just needed to play. One more time, not in the dark, not in hiding, but in front of the world. Even if they came to laugh, she would make them listen, because the music inside her never died. It only waited. Now it was ready, and so was she. The week after Alina said yes to the talent show, the town began to buzz with excitement. Posters were put up on walls and trees, and a stage was built near the community hall. People talked about it at the market, at the bakery, and while walking their dogs. Everyone was ready to watch singers, dancers, and young musicians perform. But more than anything, they were waiting to see the surprise act. That was what Marcella had called Alina when she posted a video online. Marcella, the social media influencer of the town, had made a short video where she laughed and said, "This weekend, you won't believe who's going to play the violin. A mystery guest. She's got the fingers of a broomstick and the look of an ironing board. But hey, maybe she'll surprise us all." Her followers laughed in the comments. Some wrote jokes. Others said they couldn't wait to see the disaster. Marcella had planned it all. She wanted to film Alina's performance, hoping she would mess up or look foolish, and then post it online to go viral. She didn't care about talent. She only cared about clicks and laughter, even if it came from hurting someone. Alina didn't know about the video. She didn't have a smartphone or social media. She spent her days working as usual, cleaning houses and washing floors. Something inside her had changed since she said yes. She had taken out her violin every night and practiced. Her fingers were stiff at first. It had been years since she had played seriously. But slowly, the movements came back. The muscle memory returned. The notes, the rhythm, the soul, it all came back, like an old friend knocking on the door after many years. She chose a piece that was close to her heart. It started with soft, simple notes and slowly became powerful and emotional. It wasn't a popular tune. It wasn't flashy, but it had meaning. It had her story in it. She didn't tell anyone about her practice. Not the neighbors, not her old friends, not the people she worked for. This performance wasn't for them. It was for herself. For the little girl who first held a violin at age 7, the teenager who won her first music award, and 4, the mother who had put the violin away after losing her child. As the day of the show came closer, the town got more excited. Marcella made more videos, teasing the audience with fake guesses. Is it a robot playing the violin? Cat dressed? Up. You'll just have to come and see. She never said Elena's name, but everyone in town already knew who it was. The joke had spread like wildfire at the local coffee shop. 2 boys giggled. You'd think she'd even know how to hold the violin? At the salon, a woman joked, maybe she'd just dust the violin instead of playing it. Even some of the performers in the show looked down on Alina, a young boy named Nico, who was a pianist and proud of his talent. He said to his sister, "It's going to be painful to watch." Poor woman. No one, not a single person, expected something beautiful. Not even a little bit. But Alina didn't care about their thoughts. She kept practicing, even when her fingers hurt. She used warm water to soak her hands at night. Massaged her wrists with oil. She hummed to herself while cooking. The music was coming back to her completely now. Not just through her fingers, but in her heart, in her mind, in her sleep. Finally, the day of the show arrived. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. The stage was set with bright lights. Rows of chairs were arranged in front, and colorful banners waved in the breeze. The crowd started gathering early. Families with kids, teenagers with phones, old couples holding hands. Everyone came to watch. Behind the stage, there was a small green room where the performers waited. Lena sat quietly in a corner, her violin case resting on her lap. She wore a clean, simple dress. She had brushed her hair neatly and wore old but polished shoes. Her eyes looked calm, but her hands were tight around the case. Other performers walked past her without saying anything. Some whispered. A group of girls in dance costumes giggled and stared. A young boy holding a ukulele said loudly, "She's actually going to do it. She's really going to go up there." Marcella entered the green room wearing a bright red dress and a fake smile. She walked straight up to Alina. "So are you ready?" she asked, her voice sweet but mocking. Alina nodded. "Yes." Marcella leaned closer and whispered, "Don't be nervous." Everyone's expecting something unforgettable. She laughed as she walked away, her camera girl recording everything from the side. Alina looked down at her case. She opened it slowly. The violin was waiting, shining softly under the room's light. It looked old but strong, just like her. The show began. First came a group of young dancers. They wore matching costumes and performed too loud pop music. The crowd cheered and clapped. Then came a magician who did a few tricks with cards. People laughed and enjoyed it. Then a teenage girl sang a song from a famous movie. Her voice was sweet but shaky. Still, the audience clapped politely. Every act was short, just 5 minutes or less. The judges, 3 local artists and a music teacher sat at a table, taking notes and giving scores. Then, Marcella came to the front with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said with excitement, "we have a very special performer next. She's one of a kind. You've never seen anything like this before." People laughed in the crowd. "Please welcome our mystery violinist." Some people clapped slowly. Others just waited, half smiling, expecting the joke to begin. Alina walked onto the stage. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just walked with her head up, holding her violin gently. The sun was beginning to set behind her. A golden light touched her face and made her look like someone out of a painting. She stood in the center. The crowd became quiet. She lifted the violin. She closed her eyes. And then she played. The first note floated out into the air like a feather, light, soft, and full of color. Then came another, and another, each one layered over the last like a painting slowly coming to life. The audience didn't laugh. They didn't move. They didn't even breathe. It was like time had stopped. Elena's fingers moved with grace and purpose. Her bow danced across the strings. The sound rose and fell like waves. Some parts were so gentle they felt like a whisper. Others were strong. Like thunder made of silk, the crowd forgot everything. No one saw an old woman anymore. they saw an artist. They saw a soul speaking through music. People who had come to laugh were now crying, some without even knowing why. Judges put down their pens. Marcella lowered her phone. Her fake smile had vanished. For the first time, she looked at Alina not as a joke, but as something she didn't understand. When the final note came, it hung in the air like the last leaf. On a tree. Then silence. And then, suddenly, applause. Loud. Long, powerful applause. The audience stood. People clapped with full hearts. Some shouted bravo. Some had tears running down their cheeks. Alina bowed once simply. Then she walked off. The stage, just as quietly as she had entered. No speeches. No proud looks. Just the music. That was enough. And the town would never forget it. After Elena's performance, the entire town felt different. People didn't know what to say at first. For a moment, they just stood there, clapping and watching her disappear behind the stage. No one laughed. No one whispered. Even the children were silent, as if they knew something very special had happened. That evening, the town didn't just witness music, they experienced emotion, beauty, and something that touched the heart. Marcella, who had planned everything to mock Alina, stood in the crowd, holding her phone, completely stunned. Her camera had captured the performance, but she didn't post it right away. For the first time, her confidence had cracked. Her mind couldn't understand what she had just seen. She had thought Alina would make a fool of herself. Instead, she made everyone feel something deep, something real. Marcella didn't feel like laughing anymore. She felt embarrassed, like she had been caught doing something cruel in front of the whole world that night. People went home and talked about Alina. Families who had never even said hello to her before suddenly wanted to know more about her. Who was she? Where did she learn to play like that? Why had she kept it a secret all these years? Old Mr. Fernandez, who had lived in the town for over 40 years, said, "I've never heard music like that, not in this town, not anywhere." Even the judge who taught music at the local school was in awe. "She doesn't just play the violin," she said to her fellow judges. "She speaks through it." Backstage, Alina packed her violin with calm hands. The noise of clapping still rang in her ears, but she didn't let it control her. She hadn't performed for applause. She had done it for herself. She had faced her fear, faced her past, and poured her whole soul into the music. That was enough. For her. But still, when she stepped outside the building and saw a small group of people waiting to thank her, she smiled shyly. A little girl came running up to her with wide eyes and asked, "Will you teach me to play the violin someday?" Alina knelt down and touched the girl's cheek. "One day," she said softly. From that night on, everything began to change. The next morning, the video of Elena's performance was posted online, not by Marcella, but by a man in the audience, who had recorded it on his phone. He wrote, "I came to see a joke. I left with tears in my eyes. This is the most beautiful performance I've ever seen." Within hours, the video started spreading. First through the town, then 2 nearby cities. People shared it, commented on it, and couldn't stop watching. By the end of the day, it had thousands of views. By the end of the week, it had gone viral, suddenly. People all over the country were asking, "Who is this woman?" Reporters started calling the community center asking for her contact. A famous TV show even sent someone to the town to find her. Alina, however, had no idea about any of this. She didn't have internet. She didn't check videos or news. She went to work as usual, sweeping floors and washing dishes. She thought the excitement would fade in a few days, but it didn't one day. As she was cleaning the steps outside, a cafe, a shiny car stopped in front of her. A woman in a blazer stepped out and said, "Are you Alina, the violinist?" Alina stood up slowly. "Yes," she replied, confused. "I'm from a music conservatory in the city. We saw your video. We'd love to invite you to perform at our annual concert. We can pay you, of course, and arrange transport." Alina didn't answer right away. She looked at the woman, then at the sky, then down at her hands. "I'm not sure," she said honestly. "It's been a long time since I was part of that world." The woman smiled kindly. "But you still belong to it." the same week. The letter came from the mayor of the town. It was an invitation to receive an honorary award for inspiring the community with her music and her strength. The mayor wrote, "Your courage reminded us that talent does not wear fancy clothes or walk with pride. Sometimes it hides in silence, waiting for the right moment to sing." Alina sat on her bed that night, holding the letter, unsure how to feel. For years, she had lived in shadows, trying to stay invisible. Now, everyone wanted to shine a light on her. It was overwhelming. She took out her violin again, not to practice this time, but to think. As she played a slow melody, she thought of Luca, her son. She remembered how he used to laugh and clap when she played. She imagined him watching her now, maybe proud, maybe smiling. Maybe this was his way of telling her it was okay to live again. The next day, she agreed to perform at the city concert. It would be her first stage in many, many years. The organizers arranged everything: travel, hotel, even a new dress. When Alina arrived at the concert hall, she was amazed. The stage was grand, the lights were bright, and the audience was much bigger than anything she had seen before. Backstage, young musicians were practicing nervously. Some were tuning instruments, others doing breathing exercises. They looked at Alina with curiosity. Some even recognized her from the viral video and greeted her with respect. A boy with curly hair said, "You're the reason I picked up the violin again." A girl added, "You reminded me why I started loving music." Alina felt shy but warm inside. She had never imagined her story could reach so many hearts. When it was her turn to perform, she walked out slowly, just like before. The audience became silent. Cameras flashed. Phones were raised. But Alina didn't look at them. She closed her eyes and let the music guide her. This time her song was different. It was a piece she had composed herself, a mix of sorrow and hope, of pain and healing. As she played, people cried, smiled, and held hands. It was more than a performance. It was a journey, and everyone in the hall traveled with her. When she finished, there was silence again. Then, like a wave, applause filled the room. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and endless. People stood up. Some shouted her name, some just cried. The host of the show came on stage and said, "Tonight, we didn't just hear music, we heard life." After that concert, Alina became well known across the country. She didn't look for fame, but it found her anyway. People sent her letters, asking for lessons. Schools invited her to speak. Music festivals wanted her to perform, but she didn't say yes to everything. She chose carefully. She only went where she felt the music would truly be understood. And back in her small town, things had changed too. The people who used to ignore her now waved when they saw her. Children ran up to her in the market. Even Marcella, the girl who had tried to embarrass her, came to apologize. "I'm sorry," Marcella said one afternoon, standing in front of Elena's door. "I was wrong. I judged you without knowing anything. I just wanted laughs. But you gave something real. You gave beauty." Elena looked at her calmly. "Thank you for your apology," she said gently. "Sometimes it takes a fall to open your eyes." From that day on, Marcella stopped making cruel videos. She started using her platform to talk about real people with real stories. She even invited Alina once to speak in a video about music and pain. Alina agreed, not for attention, but to help others understand that behind every quiet face, there might be a world of strength. Months passed, and Alina continued living in her small house, doing simple things, watering her plants, feeding the birds, walking to the market. But now, her life had music in it again, not just at night, but every day. She started teaching a few students at the community center. She smiled more. She even laughed sometimes. The violin no longer stayed under her bed. It stayed in her hands because music had never left her. It had just waited, and now she was ready to share it with everyone who needed to remember that silence is not weakness, and that every soul has a story waiting to sing. Elena's life had taken a turn she never expected. From being someone nobody noticed, she had become a name that people respected and admired. but she remained the same humble, quiet woman. Even when people came up to her and asked for autographs or photos, she didn't let it make her proud. She simply smiled and thanked them. For her, the music was still something personal. It was her way of speaking, of remembering her past, of expressing things she could never say in words. One morning, Alina woke up and sat beside her small window, sipping her tea. Outside, the streets were quiet, and the sky was soft with early sunlight. She looked at her violin case beside the table. She had been getting many invitations lately to perform at bigger events, even in other countries. Oh, she didn't say yes to all of them. She didn't want to become busy with fame and forget why she had started playing again in the first place. She only said yes when she felt the performance had meaning. That day, she received a letter that touched her deeply. It came from a school for children with disabilities in a nearby town. The principal had written, "Many of our children saw your video and were inspired. They want to meet you, and if possible, listen to you play.
Yes.
Some of them cannot speak. Some cannot hear, but they feel music in their own way. Would you visit us?" Elena held the letter in her hands for a long time. This invitation was different. It wasn't about fame or applause or cameras. It was about connection. About giving something without expecting anything back. She wrote back a simple answer. Yes, I would be honored. A week later, she packed her violin and traveled to the school. The building was not fancy. Paint was peeling in some places, and the playground had only a few old swings, but the children were full of life. Some were in wheelchairs, some used signs to speak, some just smiled shyly and held on to their teachers. When Alina entered, they greeted her with bright eyes and claps, even though some couldn't hear the sound. The teachers had set up a small room with chairs and pillows. Alina sat on a simple stool, took out her violin, and began to play. But this time, she played differently. She didn't try to impress. She played gently, slowly, with softness, like she was whispering stories into the wind. The children watched with wide eyes. Some closed their eyes and swayed. Others tapped their hands on their laps. One little girl reached out and touched the floor as if feeling the vibrations through her. Fingers, another boy who couldn't speak, began humming softly. Alina noticed all of this. She felt tears behind her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She kept playing, pouring her heart into the music, giving everything she had to those children who had already given her so much just by listening. After the performance, the children came forward with drawings they had made. Some had drawn violins. Some had drawn hearts. One little boy gave her a picture where she stood on a stage with a golden light above her head. Alina hugged each of them, one by one. The principal came to her and said, "You didn't just play music, you touched souls today. Thank you." Alina stayed there for a while, talking to the children, teaching them how to hold a bow, how to feel the rhythm. Even those who couldn't hear would hold the violin close to their chest and feel the vibrations that day. Something new awakened inside Alina. She realized that music could be more than just art. It could be healing. It could be a bridge between people who couldn't talk or understand each other in normal ways. She started thinking about something she had never imagined before, opening a small music school. Not for money, not for fame, but for people who had no other place to go. For children like the ones she met. For lonely people, or anyone who carried pain in silence. Back in her town, she shared her idea with a few friends, and to her surprise, many offered to help. A retired carpenter offered to make benches. A lady from the bookstore donated some chairs. Even Marcella, who had once tried to embarrass her, came with a donation. "I want to be part of something good," Marcella said. "Honestly, and I want to learn." Alina looked at her and nodded. "Everyone is welcome," she said. They found a small, empty hall near the town library. It was dusty and old, but the walls were strong. Slowly, with the help of many hands, it turned into a place filled with light and warmth. They painted the walls with soft colors. They put up pictures of instruments. They made a corner with books about music, added rugs and cushions, and even a tiny stage. Alina called it the listening room. She said, "It's not just for those who want to play, it's for those who want to feel." People from the town began visiting. Some came just to sit and listen. Some came to learn. A little girl who had never spoken much began taking violin lessons. A young boy who had been bullied found comfort in the piano. Even older people joined, saying they had always wanted to try music, but never had the chance. Alina taught with patience and kindness. She never rushed. She never scolded. She believed music was not about perfection. It was about honesty. When someone made a mistake, she smiled and said, "Good. That means you're learning." One afternoon, something special happened. A woman walked into the room holding her daughter's hand. Alina recognized her immediately. It was Mrs. Kovach, a wealthy woman Alina had once worked for as a cleaner. Mrs. Kovach looked a little unsure, a little nervous. "My daughter, she's been feeling lonely. She doesn't talk much. I thought maybe music might help," she said. Quietly, Alina looked at the little girl and smiled. "Would you like to play the violin?" The girl nodded slowly. Alina gave her a small violin to hold, guiding her fingers with care. And just like that, another soul joined the circle. Word of Alina's music school began to spread. Not because it was famous, but because it was real. People came from nearby towns to see what was happening. Some donated instruments. A woman who had once been a professional cellist but had stopped playing after her husband died came and offered. To teach, it became a place of healing, a place where no one was laughed at, where mistakes were part of the journey, and where silence was respected. One evening, as Alina locked up the listening room, she stood for a moment and looked at the door. She thought of the journey she had taken from a quiet, ignored woman mopping floors to someone whose music had touched thousands. But more than that, she had found her purpose again, not just for herself. She thought of Luca, her son, whispered softly into the air, "You're still with me." She still visited the cemetery sometimes, not to cry, but to play. She would sit near his grave and let her violin speak to him. And somehow, she felt like he heard. Music had become her way of speaking to the world, but it had also become her way of listening to people's silence, to their pain, to their dreams. And in that quiet town, in a small room with soft walls and warm light, Alina created something more powerful than applause. She created hope, and she wasn't done yet. Alina's small music school, the listening room, to now become a special place, not just in her town, but in the hearts of many people far beyond it. The walls, once empty and old, were now filled with pictures of smiling faces, hand-drawn, posters, colorful music notes, and photographs of the children and adults who had walked through its doors. Some came to learn, some just to listen, and others came to heal. But every single one of them left with something more than what they brought. Alina didn't have fancy degrees, and she didn't care about certificates or awards. Her teaching was simple and full of heart. She believed every person carried a song inside them, even if they didn't know how to play an instrument or couldn't sing in tune. To her, music was not about being the best, it was about being true. And that belief slowly turned the listening room into a place where everyone felt safe. People started calling her teacher Alina. Even the older men at the cafe, who once ignored her, now tipped their hats when she passed by. Children would run up to her with their toy instruments, pretending to be just like her. Alina always stopped, listened, and encouraged them. No matter how silly or off-tune they sounded, but even as her life changed, Alina stayed deeply connected to her past. Every morning before going to the school, she visited a small wooden box in her bedroom. Inside it were Luca's drawings, old pictures, and a small toy car he once loved. She would sit beside it, close her eyes, and whisper, "Are you watching me, Luca? I hope you're proud." Sometimes, she would play his favorite lullaby on the violin, the one she used to play when he couldn't sleep. The melody filled her room like a warm blanket, brought tears, yes, but also peace. Luca was no longer physically there, but in her music, he lived on. In every soft note and gentle rhythm, there was a memory of him smiling. One winter evening, a letter arrived that made Alina pause. It was from a famous music festival in the capital city. The letter said they were honoring people who had inspired others through music, and Alina's name had been chosen. They wanted her to come and receive the award in front of a large audience, filled with musicians, celebrities, and press. At first, Alina wasn't sure. Big cities made her nervous. Bright lights, large crowds, they weren't her world anymore. But then she thought about the children at her school, about how she always told them to be brave, to share their gift without fear. How could she ask them to be courageous if she herself wasn't willing? So, she said yes. The festival organizers arranged everything: travel, hotel, and even a beautiful gown for her to wear. When she arrived in the city, people welcomed her like a star. Some recognized her from the viral video years ago, others had heard of her school. But Alina remained quiet and kind. The same woman who once cleaned floors and played music alone at night. The festival night arrived. The hall was grand, filled with people dressed in glittering clothes. Famous singers, actors, and musicians sat in the audience. Alina stood backstage, holding her violin. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and saw the lines on her face, the silver in her hair. She wasn't young, but she was strong. She wasn't famous by choice, but her story had traveled far. When they called her name, she stepped onto the stage. The lights shone brightly, and for a moment the crowd went silent. Then came the sound of applause, loud, respectful, and full of admiration. Alina took the microphone, but she didn't say much, just a few words. I never expected any of this. I just followed my heart and let the music speak. One, dedicate this to my son Luca, who gave me the strength to keep going. To everyone out there who thinks they are too small or too late, your story still matters. Then she lifted her violin and began to play. The hall filled with the softest, most beautiful notes anyone had heard that night. No background music, no drums. Just one woman, one violin, and one heart pouring out everything she had lived. Music carried joy, sadness, pain, hope, and love, all at once. By the time she finished, many had tears in their eyes. People stood up, clapping, cheering, some whispering her name with respect. After the show, reporters tried to speak to her cameras, followed her, but Alina gently smiled and said, "Tonight is about the music, not about me." Then she quietly left the stage and walked outside, away from the noise. A few days later, when she returned to her town, the students at the listening room were waiting for her with flowers and a homemade banner that read, "Our teacher, our hero." She laughed, a soft, happy laugh that hadn't been heard in her voice in years. She hugged them all and said, "This award belongs to all of us." Over the next few months, the school grew. More people offered help. Music shops sent instruments. For free, a retired pianist started giving weekly classes. A cafe owner nearby offered to give free tea and snacks to students after class. It became more than a school, it became a community. But Alina didn't stop there. She began visiting other small towns, especially where children didn't have access to music or art. She gave free workshops, sometimes in dusty schoolrooms, sometimes under trees. She spoke to teachers about the power of music in healing and teaching. Wherever she went, she carried her old violin and her quiet wisdom. One day, during one such visit, a little boy came up to her after the session and said, "My mom cries a lot since my dad died. Can you teach her music too?" Alina knelt and looked into his eyes. "Yes," she said, "bring her tomorrow." This was the heart of Alina's mission, not just music for the talented, but music for the broken, the silent, the forgotten. Her life had been full of struggles, but now it was full of purpose. She gave that purpose to others without asking for anything in return. Years passed and Alina grew older. Her steps became slower and her hair turned completely white. But her hands still held the violin with the same care, and her heart still beat with music. The listening room was now run by her students, many of whom had grown up under her teaching. They respected her deeply, and every year they celebrated Alina Day with music and memories. One quiet morning, Alina sat by her window with her tea, just like always. The sun shone softly, birds chirped outside, and the town was waking up. She looked at the violin by her side and smiled. She had lived a life full of pain, yes, but also full of meaning. She picked up the violin one last time and played a tune so gentle, it felt like a goodbye kiss to the world. The notes floated out the window, danced with the wind, and settled into the hearts of those who heard. Later that day, when someone came to check on her, they found her sitting peacefully, her violin resting on her lap, and a soft smile on her face. The town mourned, but they also celebrated because Alina was never truly gone. Her music lived in every child who learned to play. Her courage lived in every woman who believed in herself again, and her love lived in every soul that walked into the listening room looking for peace. Alina's story started in silence, passed through pain, ended in harmony, and that was her final gift to the world. A reminder that no one is too small to be great, and that even the quietest melody can move the loudest heart.